see me coming. Yeah, well, they see me coming. So, good morning. Thank you for coming. My name is Kevin Werner. I'm the Executive Director of Ohioans to Stop Executions, one of the leading organizations in the No Death Penalty Ohio campaign. This morning, a letter was sent to every member of the Ohio General Assembly from more than 530 faith leaders from across the state. The letter, which Reverend Poole will read here in a moment, calls on the legislature to end the death penalty. There are some 17 different faith traditions that are represented among the signatories on that letter. Those faith leaders span every corner of the state, and that shows the deep connection that Ohioans have to repealing the death penalty. I'd like to welcome Reverend Poole to the podium to read the letter, and then we'll have remarks by each of us.
Good morning. I am Reverend Michael Poole. I am called to serve as the senior pastor of Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Marion, Ohio. It is truly an honor and a privilege speaking to you this morning. Kevin asked me to read the letter. This is the letter in full, dated May 4th, 2026. To the members of the Ohio General Assembly. As people of faith, we are committed to policies rooted in justice and grounded in the promise of redemption. While we come from varied backgrounds and political stances, we stand together against state-sanctioned murder. Instead, we are motivated by the restorative power of empathy and investments in transformation. We hold deep care and respect for victims and co-victims of crime, and we most certainly are not opposed to accountability for rightfully convicted persons. However, we believe that the death penalty serves no purpose. Instead, it is a hollow instrument of death that offers no redemption, no closure, no transformation for anyone. The death penalty monopolizes human and financial resources that would be better spent if applied to the co-victims whose glaring list of needs often goes unmet. Now is the time for Ohio to rid itself of its outdated and immoral death penalty. As people who are motivated by faith and sparked by profound love for the common good, we are calling on you to endorse the bipartisan multi-faith effort to abolish the death penalty in the state of Ohio. And it is signed by over 530 signatories, which were attached to the document as well. For me personally, I am ordained by the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, and we drafted a social statement on the death penalty and passed it by our church-wide assembly in September of 1991. We've had a position on the death penalty since 1991. And the three main reasons we oppose the death penalty are, first, we believe that we should be moving to restorative justice as we see in the presentation of Jesus in the Gospels, who cares for the harm and hurt of everybody involved in the situation, and continually moves for redemption and renewal and transformation. And so we're looking more for restorative justice. We also believe that the use of the death penalty is a violent means of consequence, and that it does not serve as a deterrent against violence, that in fact it just legitimizes the use of violence in society. And thirdly, we've come to find that there does not appear to be a fair way to administer capital punishment in our society. It is just an unfair system for a variety of reasons. In full disclosure, prior to becoming an ordained pastor, I retired from a career in law enforcement here in Central Ohio. And so, to be honest, I've seen the worst that humanity has done to humanity. And even in those situations, I still stand, did then, still today, on that position that I don't believe death is the consequence for anything that I've saw. It was really cemented for me when an acquaintance of mine was sentenced to death row. And I served in the Ohio Army National Guard. One of the individuals I served with for over 10 years, in November of 1995, I went on a killing spree, killed 4 people, including a 5-month-old child, injured 2 others, and I knew him personally and knew his situation in life. And even then, I still didn't believe that as he spent time on death row, that was an appropriate penalty for him. And so I find it interesting. We sat in the ladies' gallery, and the banners hanging on the wall are justice and morality. And I think these ladies that have worked tirelessly to sit in their midst today remind us that our justice must be based in morality. And for us, we believe it should be a restorative process. So I freely signed this letter calling our General Assembly to move to a much more restorative process. Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to thank Kevin Werner, Ohioans to Stop Executions, my co-presenters, and all of you for joining us today. My name is Marcia Forsett, and I have the pleasure of serving as an Associate Director for Social Concerns with the Catholic Conference of Ohio. The conference is the official voice of the Church in Ohio on matters of public policy and government relations. So in our tradition, Easter, the celebration of Christ's victorious bodily resurrection from the dead and triumph over evil and death 2,000 years ago, is celebrated for 50 days. We are now in the 5th week of this season. Why, you might ask, do we celebrate Easter for an entire season? Well, because a day cannot contain the mystery. A week cannot hold the gift. In fact, all of time would be too little to celebrate so great a gift. And what does this mystery grant us? But the hope of life, life eternal. Hope that one day all things will be placed in proper order, that justice and peace will reign, and every tear will be wiped from our eyes. The promise proclaims that such a day is in fact not so distant, but begins among us even now. You see, the radical Christian claim revealed at Easter is this: each person's fundamental identity and value is rooted not in the good or evil he or she has done, but in the invaluable self-sacrificing love of one who, though also God, bore their punishment, in fact a capital sentence, in total and complete love for them on the cross. This means there is no longer any value that can be placed on a human life other than the inestimable price of Christ's sacrifice. Whether the person killed in an attempt to take justice into his own hands like Moses, had a woman's husband murdered like King David, or was seeking and, quote, breathing out murderous threats against first-century Christians like St. Paul, the inviolable dignity of the human person remains unchanged, and the real capacity for conversion and repentance exists. For this reason, as our church teaches and Pope Leo stated in a recent video message which marked the 15th anniversary of Illinois' abolition of the death penalty, quote, the dignity of the person is not lost even after very serious crimes are committed. This does not mean that there is no room or proprietary right of a state to punish. Far from it. The church maintains that, quote, in order to protect the common good, the lawful public authority must exercise the right and the duty to inflict punishments according to the seriousness of the crimes committed. While punishment must be imposed, we also hold that bloodless methods of deterrence and punishment better correspond to the concrete conditions of the common good and are more in conformity with the dignity of the human person. Pope Leo also reminded us that effective systems of detention can be and have been developed that protect citizens, but at the same time do not completely deprive those who are guilty of the possibility of redemption. Life without the possibility of parole is a serious consequence for grave actions. The phenomenon of execution volunteers, those who would rather waive their right to appeal than undergo years in prison, has been documented. Through the prophet Ezekiel, God says, quote, "I swear I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that they turn from their ways and live." We've observed this turning from wickedness among the Catholic inmates on death row, who turn to the Lord by attending Mass and seeking God's grace with the help of the Church. We know that repealing Ohio's death penalty is both fiscally responsible and an efficient path to swifter justice for victims. The Ohio Legislative Services Commission has estimated that the total amount expended in the capital case can range from 2.5 to 5 times as much as the non-capital case. For the 2024 Capital Crimes Report, if these estimates apply to Ohio, then the extra cost of imposing the death penalty could range between $116 million to $348 million. We also know that individuals spend decades on death row and are more likely to die of natural causes or suicide than by execution. Lastly, repeal would also ensure that state employees are not asked to participate in the act of killing and the likely associated consequences and trauma. We urge the legislature to imitate the divine justice which does mercy by taking up and passing repeal legislation. Indeed, as Shakespeare writes in The Merchant of Venice, "Earthly power doth then show likest gods, when mercy seasons justice." We'd like to thank Representative Gene Schmidt and Adam Matthews and Senators Huffman and Nikki Antonio for leading the way. Their bills offer a view of life as God sees it. The worth of human life is not determined by previous actions, circumstances, or stage of development. Through a simple declaration, the state will not participate in intentional killing. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning. My name is Rich Nathan, and I'm the founding pastor of Vineyard Columbus here in Columbus, Ohio. And I pastored at that church for nearly 40 years. Vineyard Columbus is an evangelical church with several branch campuses. And for many years, Vineyard Columbus was the largest vineyard church in the world and the largest church of any denomination in Central Ohio. For decades, Vineyard Columbus had one of the largest pro-life ministries in the country. In the early 2000s, we ministered to over 5,000 women who faced unintended pregnancies. We came alongside those women with spiritual, material, and emotional support. We helped women with doctor visits, with spiritual, emotional help, with diapers, pack and plays, apartments, employment, and more. Many of my fellow Christians are pro-life when it pertains to abortion, but either support capital punishment, convicted murderers, or they've just never really thought about it. But I'd like to offer several reasons why those people who consider themselves pro-life, and especially pro-life legislators, ought to apply our pro-life consciences to capital punishment as well. We pro-lifers say that a person's right to life should not depend upon anyone else's judgment, whether a mother or a doctor. We've been unwilling to surrender the right to life to society's valuation of a person's wantedness or their potential capabilities. We also have argued that the right to life is not earned so that it could be forfeited, but is instead a gift of God, founded in God's image in each of us from conception to natural death. Our pro-life arguments regarding the inherent worth of each individual should apply to everyone, whether in the womb, severely disabled, institutionalized due to Alzheimer's, or convicted of murder. We also understand the instinct behind capital punishment. When a crime is truly horrific, people believe the death penalty is, there's a deep human desire for real justice, and many people believe that the death penalty is reserved for the worst of the worst and is applied carefully and fairly. But when we step back from the abstraction of capital punishment, we look honestly at how the system works. Those beliefs begin to break down. If we are pro-life, we can never justify the taking of an innocent life. No justice system created by human beings is perfect. Cases rely on eyewitnesses who can be mistaken. They rely on forensic methods, some of which have been discredited. They rely on police work and prosecution, which is usually honorable, but is not immune from error or misconduct. The Innocence Project has shown that wrongful convictions often involve a combination of these factors: misidentification, flawed science, and unfortunately at times withheld evidence. With any other punishment, we have the humility and ability to correct what's gone wrong, and it's built into the system. We can release the wrongly convicted person. But with the death penalty, there is no correction. There is no second chance. If we get it wrong, we've ended a life, and the mistake is permanent. In addition, the impact of capital punishment goes far beyond the individual who is executed. We often speak as if the entire burden of execution falls on the condemned. But in reality, the burden is carried by many people: jurors who must make the decision, judges who have to impose the sentence, prison staff who have to carry it out, wardens, medical personnel. These are human beings who are being asked to participate directly in ending a life. Many of them report carrying the weight long after the execution is over. The price of capital punishment is borne by many, many people, and sometimes it's carried for years. There's also the question of the victim's family. Many people ask, don't they deserve justice for the horrible way that people are murdered? Our hearts should break for families of murdered victims. As a pastor, I presided over the funerals of several murder victims, including one involving a young mother killed along with her 2 school-aged children. For years, our church did free funerals for murder victims here in Columbus. We helped with all funeral expenses. We offered follow-up care to family members left behind. Compassion demands that we come alongside families impacted by murder in the quest for justice. But capital punishment is not compassionate. It does not bring closure to a victim's family. Rather, it prolongs a family's agony through the twists and turns of decade-long appeals, which often result in different sentences in the end. Each new hearing reopens old wounds. Every delay keeps the trauma alive. In contrast, life without parole can provide a more certain and immediate sense of finality. And that brings us to the important point we've already made, that there are alternatives to protect society. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole ensures that those who commit the most serious crimes among us will never return to public life. It holds people accountable, and it does so without taking an irreversible risk of executing an innocent person. So ultimately, the issue is not whether terrible crimes deserve serious punishment. They absolutely do. The real question is whether we can trust a human system, one that we know is not godlike, it's fallible, it's uneven, it's influenced by bias, it's affected by race and economics. And I want to appeal today, especially to people, whether religious or not, who consider themselves pro-life. When we look at the way we carry out capital punishment in America, we realize that the death penalty is not applied in a consistent or principled way. It does not simply track the severity of the crime. It often depends on where the crime took place, how the prosecutor handles the case, whether the defendant had the resources for a strong legal defense. Our justice system cannot reliably deliver an absolutely perfect verdict, and that's what's needed when we take a human life. In matters of life and death, good enough is not good enough. For these reasons, I want to urge the legislature to abolish capital punishment in the state of Ohio. And I speak as a pro-life Christian. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Dr. Jack Sullivan Jr., recently retired Executive Director of the Ohio Council of Churches, based here in Columbus. As an advocate for the demise of the death penalty, I acknowledge that the public has every right to be outraged over horrific acts that disrupt and destroy the lives of our fellow citizens, our neighbors, public servants, and more. as a co-victim who lost a sister to murder in 1997 in my hometown, Cleveland, I have felt such anger and outrage. These sentiments are legitimate reactions to the calculated, unethical, and immoral decision-making that drove other human beings to engage in repulsive, homicidal acts that ended the lives of other human beings, our loved ones, and forever altered the direction of our families. As we acknowledge the frustration over acts of murder, the urgent question before us is as follows: what is our response to rightfully convicted people who have angered us and who have hurt us the most? While I am a co-victim, I'm also a man of Christian faith, a minister of the loving, merciful, and transforming gospel of Jesus Christ. Through my intersecting identities as co-victim and Christian, I believe that whether an intentional life-ending act is carried out on a city street or in a prison as authorized by the state, killing is wrong. To be sure, homicide intended to demonstrate that homicide is repugnant is, by definition, also repugnant. I recall a moment from my youth where during the middle of the night, I awakened to the unmistakable smell of smoke. The house next door to ours had caught fire and was threatening to consume my family's house. An instant later, someone in my house, among my relatives, called the fire department. And I remember that once the firefighters arrived, they were quick to apply massive amounts of water to the fire because water was the antidote to fire. Adding more fire would have been counterproductive. Water was needed to extinguish the fire. That is why there are fire hydrants in our neighborhoods instead of flamethrowers. Accordingly, the cycle of calculated, unethical, and immoral acts of homicide in our neighborhoods is not diminished by the state's own brand of replication of those acts through executions in the prisons. Executions exacerbate the cycle of death as they force the state, our beloved state, to surrender its moral and ethical high ground as it lives in a clear and present moral conundrum. In one statute saying it respects lives, while in another reserving millions of dollars toward the cancellation of lives through executions. In the Gospel of John, Jesus was tested to see if he would endorse the public stoning execution of a woman caught in adultery. Interestingly, her counterpart was not arrested, caught, and convicted and condemned, an early sign of bias in the execution business, one that can even be seen now. When Jesus told the woman's all-male jury that they could stone her only if they were sinless themselves, the men dropped their stones, turned, and walked away because, of course, they were not sin-free citizens. Sparked by love, justice, and a commitment to non-lethal systems of accountability, Jesus threw the water of mercy on an execution. He extinguished the consuming fires of death and redeemed a life destined to be discarded. out of a sense of love and concern for justice and commitment to the merciful and transformative power of God made known through Jesus Christ. I believe that we who describe ourselves as followers of Jesus Christ, we who have received mercy, we who have had our lives transformed by the power of God, this is our moment here in Ohio to lead the charge in calling our legislators to drop their stones and to walk away from executions, state-sponsored homicide, and embrace non-lethal, restorative paths toward accountability. Consider three leaders from our Judeo-Christian heritage: Moses, David, and Paul. Each one an epic biblical leader, and each one with murder on his resume and in his credit file. Yet God transformed all of them into becoming authoritative voices of our faith, the faith that so many, including I myself, call mine. In the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul delivers the earth-shattering news to many as he reported that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All means all. Perhaps this is why Jesus included the forgiveness clause in the prayer that he taught his disciples, and therefore us, as he instructs his followers to ask for forgiveness of sins at the same rate that they are willing to forgive others who sinned against them. For I have it on good authority that God is still in the unconditional loving business. God is still granting new mercies morning by morning. And God is still able to transform lives, including those whose lives on death row. As imperfect as we all are, who are we to interrupt the transformative machinery of God through executions? These are questions we must consider in the Christian household of faith, particularly as we continue to sing with enthusiasm, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. 'Twas blind, but now I see." I believe that the transforming love, grace, and mercy of God through those important traits of God, no one need ever be forever known for the worst thing they've ever done in their lives. As a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, who is aligned with over 500 faith leaders across this great state, I am asking my siblings in faith in the Ohio House and Senate to resist the urge to fight fire with fire, death with more death. Please drop the stones of executions, for it is abundantly self-evident that executions have no power to bring about healing, wholeness, or closure. Executions serve exactly no one. I implore you, siblings of faith in the House and the Senate, to instead identify yourselves with the restorative power of God's love and align yourselves with the reconciling power of God's mercy. After all, there are people on death row who, by the grace of God, could be the next Moses, David, Paul, Esther, or Mary. As angry as we may be at people on death row, they are still children of God, eligible for the love of God and candidates for the mercy of God. Thank you very much.
Before we take, excuse me, any questions, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Dayton, Ohio's own Demetrius Minor, who's the executive director of Conservatives Concerned about the Death Penalty, a national organization that's working here in Ohio. So welcome, Demetrius. What questions do folks have? Maybe we could come a little closer there, maybe.
Your letter obviously went to the legislature, and was wondering about what governor is thinking of doing that at this point. Are you guys engaging with her? Are you optimistic that whatever comments you can be
Yeah, I think that, thank you for the question. I think the governor was copied, and I think he was one of the recipients, even though he's not a member of the GA. I mean, the issue is clearly on his mind. He's going to say what he's going to say, imminently. I think his timetable was sometime after the primaries. Those are, less than a day away. So we're eagerly anticipating what the governor is going to say. Does anybody want to add?
Yeah, I'm sure this is the first attempt, I wonder why.
I would invite faith leaders to come forward and answer that from the perspective of the campaign and of the years-long work. I mean, I think that in this particular moment, it's vital that Ohio address this issue now. There are something like 30 execution dates scheduled, beginning on the second day of the next administration. Governor DeWine has been careful. He's been thoughtful on this issue. He certainly has executive clemency powers to consider. And the fact is that Ohio has gotten along fine without needing to use the death penalty for the last 8 years. More people have left Ohio's death row since the last execution because of severe mental illness, or because individuals have died of natural causes, or people have been removed because things like they didn't commit the crime. So the death penalty system has utterly failed, and we have decades of information about where those failures are. And Ohio just doesn't need it. I would pass to any of the faith leaders here to talk about the morality if they desire, but Ohio doesn't need the death penalty anymore. It costs too much money. It harms victim family members, and we get it wrong a lot, it turns out.
Speaker Matt Huffman has said that he doesn't think it's going to happen with the proposals from the floor, and he would even fight it vigorously. How do you convince him that these are the right paths to take?
Sure, I think the following day the speaker said that if the majority of his caucus were there, he wouldn't block it.
So that gives you hope that you would.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this has been a long process for many years, and from a campaign perspective, we're much closer to ending the death penalty than we have before. There are a lot of things that are happening, both in the state and outside of the state. But I think that the public's approach to this issue has markedly changed, and I think the legislature is starting to wake up to that.
Have you spoken to any of the candidates for governor, or do you plan to talk to them at all?
Oh, yeah, on that. You needed to get speaking voters for the whole next year. Given that we'll have a governor in all, I guess, what concerns do you have that if this isn't addressed now, we're going to be back executing?
Please don't let me hog on that. Okay. Yeah, here's what we know from the times when Ohio had been impacted executing state. Executions were botched. There were problems accessing drugs. There were problems with the actual procedure and intravenous vein access. There has been decades long litigation. It seems that stop, start was the approach that happened in the courts. I would argue that doesn't serve family members. I would argue that doesn't serve the people of the state of Ohio. And so we've already seen, the past has already predicted what the future holds if Ohio goes back down that road. And so we know what the outcome is going to be, and there's a much better way forward that doesn't put corrections officers in this untenable position. It doesn't put the victim families in this, again, back and forth. Is it off? Is it on? Is there an appeal? Is there not? We can avoid all of that harm by acknowledging that the system doesn't work. It's time to turn the page, and there's a better alternative for all of those who were involved. So we know what it's like when executions occur.
I'm not sure I heard the full question, but I would offer that there is a whole cadre of issues and needs that are experienced and felt by murder victim families. And not one of those issues and needs is met or matched by executions. It is far more, it's far better for those funds earmarked for executions to be spent in a variety of constructive ways, particularly investing in the families of murder victims who often have lost their breadwinner or a key part of their family member who cannot ever be replaced, but who left some open needs and issues that need to be addressed through financial means. And so I would much rather see money that's set aside for executions to be devoted toward murder victim families in Ohio.
The question was asked, why now, compared to a year from now with new candidates? I do know that Governor DeWine has a sincere faith, and I know that his church teaches against capital punishment. I don't know what the faith traditions are of the candidates that are running for governor or what their faith teaches, but I do know what Governor DeWine's church teaches, and we heard from the Catholic Conference. So we're asking as faith leaders that those who are in the legislature, and especially our governor, act in accordance with the faith teachings of the church that they go to and the faith that they profess.
Well, thank you all for coming. I'm sure folks will stick around for a bit if there's a follow-up question or two.